Hello, I'm Jenny Ferd and welcome to my library. I'm a chaotic neutral mechanical engineer who's really into permaculture and wants to talk about books. So let's talk about books. There's a crow outside that has distracted me. So today I want to do a TBR check-in. A while ago, I did a TBR video and I selected a handful of books that I wanted to read for that TBR. I think the first book that I read after doing the TBR video was the last lecture. So before the last lecture, I read 3 books that I want to include for this TBR. So I did talk briefly about these books in the TBR setup video, but I want to go over them a little bit here. So number 1 is Haiku. And I did write a haiku every day for a little bit less than a month, maybe like 24 days or something like that. So if you would like to get a peek into that, let me know in the comments and I can share the haiku that I wrote every day. I would also like to share some of my favorites from this. Okay, I love this one. Cleaning a saucepan, ripples on the water, a solitary seagull. That is by Busan. The next one. Companionless, Thrown Away on the Moor, The Winter Moon by Rosecki. Placing his hands on the ground, the frog respectfully recites his poem by Sokon. It was just so fun to read these. I had a great time. I didn't read them all in one sitting. I intentionally read them over a period of time so that they would sink in a little bit more. And I did read most of them several times. Next, I had A Room of One's Own by Virginia Woolf. I didn't really know anything about this, but I loved this. This is kind of like an essay that is all about what it would take for women to be able to write novels. Yeah, it's just the whole idea of like women needing to have stability in their lives. They need basically money and a space. And I just thought that was so compelling that, you know, for so long, women didn't have money and a space of their own. And there is a description of Jane Austen, that when she was writing her novels, she was writing like in the parlor with the kids, with the family, and that when company would come over, she would like hide her manuscripts under something so that they wouldn't know. Even though she had the support of like her immediate family, she wouldn't have the support of society at large, and she never had her own space to do that as like her primary thing. So anyway, I really liked this. Then we have A Wild Swan by Michael Cunningham. I got this from a thrift store and I thought it was so cool. It has this hair, this like braided hair text, which was such a cool effect. And then it has this like wing embossed, which I also thought was such a cool effect. Really hard to show on camera. I don't think you're gonna be able to see it. But I was like, wow, what is this? And the illustrations inside are also quite compelling. This here. And I thought it looked so cool and creepy. So anyway, this was a retelling of certain fairy tales. They are quite dark. I've read something so similar to this before that I was also fairly underwhelmed by, and that was The Merry Spinster. And this idea of retelling fairy tales with some sort of like spin on it, the spins with this just weren't it. And I'll be completely honest, I thought the writing was really pretentious. Like some of the word choice seemed overly complicated and like unique, I guess, for the sake of being overly complicated. It didn't feel very sincere. So I just didn't have that great of a time with this, but I did read it all the way through, and that's my own fault. So here we have The Last Lecture by Randy Pausch. which was the first book that I read from this specific TBR after the video. Was underwhelmed by this book. There were a few ideas that I took away from it being like, oh, that's compelling. So this is written by a man who had terminal cancer. He knew he was going to die. He worked as a professor at Carnegie Mellon. He was an engineering, computer science or computer engineering professor. He was really into like virtual reality stuff. And all of that is pretty compelling for me as an engineer myself. I'm a mechanical engineer. It wasn't the advice that I needed. I did mention in some other video when I talked briefly about this that he comes off as very privileged and he just doesn't really seem to know it. And I really still believe that he has these ideas about work. Your dreams can come true. Anybody who's had any difficult situations that are not easily overcome would know that usually things are not that easy. So, like, I feel really bad about it because the guy, he died of cancer. Like, he died of cancer, he left his children fatherless, and that's very difficult and challenging. But also, I just don't really recommend this to that many people, to be perfectly frank. Maybe to somebody who's interested in going to college. Genuinely, this has to be for only young people. I don't really see this applying to adults who have gone through much hardship. The next book that I read from this TBR is The Sea Wolf by Jack London. I had a pretty good time with this. I have small disconnects with Jack London's fiction writing. And this was it pretty much held me for most of it. I feel like he has this tendency to have like a fairly contained story, just like do something else. So we have a guy, he's like a writer, he's like an author or something, I can't remember exactly. Our main character, he has a wreck in San Francisco Bay or close to that area. And he is picked up by a sealing boat. So he is taken in by this crew, and particularly by this incredibly cruel captain. And so there's lots of discussions about like what humanity really is, what it is to be moral. Lots of conversations about morals and ethics and that kind of thing. Like what life is. Loved that. Really compelling conversations between our main character and the guy, the sea wolf guy, Wolf Larson, I think his name is. Then there's this whole other part of the story, which I'm getting into spoilers, but this book has been out for a long ass time, so be aware, I'm going to do some spoilers. There's a woman that they pick up on the ship, and she is also some sort of writer or editor. They have like a connection in terms of like, they know each other professionally in some regard. And our main character falls in love with this woman who's been taken on the ship. There's like a whole bunch of crazy like murders and plots and stuff the whole time that this is happening as well. They escape and they go onto an island and they like are living out their little like world on an island. Like it gets all Robinson Crusoe, but like with a lady. It's this whole different vibe, this whole different story. It's not exploring the same morals really anymore. And then we get back into it and then things wrap up. It's structure-wise really strange. But yes, I did quite enjoy this. It was riveting. I read some other things in this time period that aren't a part of this TBR list that I won't be discussing here, just so everybody knows. Next I read Red Mars by Kim Stanley Robinson. And you can see this is thick. This was an investment in my time. I just could not for the life of me connect with these characters. I don't know. I feel like I was a passenger. I was there, I was present. I knew what was going on, but there was, the characters are so important in this story because you're really clearly supposed to care about them. Like, the characters are supposed to be the thing, but I was so disconnected from them. I could kind of tell who they were at any given point. I don't know who any of them are now. At some point, characters started dying, and it was genuinely at that moment that I was like, oh, something went wrong with my consuming of this book, where I just did not care at all. I just did not care. This was a bit of a painful experience for me, to be perfectly honest. It being so long and me just not caring enough. I loved hearing all of the technical conversation. I loved the sci-fi aspects of it. I even liked hearing about some of the social stuff. I really wish it was more science, concepts, maybe more like terraforming science. I think I would find that much more interesting and enjoyable, because I just didn't care about the characters, and I didn't like them. And I don't know what went wrong, but I really thought I was going to enjoy this, and I did not enjoy this nearly as much as I thought I would. The next book that I read was The Good Earth by Pearl S. Buck. I actually got a comment about this book. You have a lot of interesting books. The only one I've read is The Good Earth, which I'd say is a bit oddly written, but still an interesting look at Chinese culture. Definitely a classic. My TBR list is in stasis, as I have too many books on my currently reading list. Shortly after that comment, I started reading this because I was pretty interested. I don't really know how to feel about this. It was very readable. Like, I kept wanting to come back to it and read it. I was interested in what was going to happen next, but this follows a certain individual. It's about most of his life. His name is Wang Lung. He is a peasant farmer in rural China. So the story opens up, he is like, Dad, I'm gonna buy us a lady. I'm gonna buy a lady. She's gonna be our servant. She's gonna make your breakfast in the morning so that I don't have to anymore. I'm gonna marry her, and that's the end of it. That's the start of this book. I have to say, it's quite a weird book. There's a lot of like sexual stuff that happens without any of it really happening on the page, which I'm so glad for. Yeah, just the stuff with the women is very weird. It's just kind of indescribable in a way, honestly. It was a really strange experience. It was fairly dramatic, like this person's life. I have no idea really what I'm supposed to take from it. Like, the land is very important, and it's where the value is. This was just such a strange experience. I definitely don't regret reading this book. I think it was an experience worth having, but it's just indescribable in some way. This book, guys, this book is amazing. I purchased this book because I was like, I'm gonna get a handful of books from the Goodwill or something to put in my little free library. But I ended up, I'm like, I'm gonna keep some of these. My little free library is full, but I'm gonna keep a handful of them for myself, and then I'll donate them afterwards. I am not donating this book. It was so good. I would really love to keep this. That was Between the World and Me by Ta-Nehisi Coates. This was so poetically written and so genuinely so poetically written. The writing is really beautiful. So this is all about being Black in America and the violence, and there's this really wonderful use of language in this book about the ownership of Black bodies. If you like Run the Jewels, RTJ4, I think you will like this book. It was so good. It was so good. I don't know. It was too short, too, in my opinion. It was so short. This is like 80 pages or something. Let me see. Okay, it's 152 pages, but it felt really short. It reads so quickly and is such an immense download of pain and understanding. I just thought it was wonderful. Now we have another weird book. That is Mr. Moe's Traveling Couch. This story was somewhat incomprehensible. There is, I think, something weird with the timeline. There's also stuff about dreams. Our character here is a man who is enamored with Freud. There's a lot of Freud stuff in here. He lives in France, but he's from China, and he has to go back to China. I can't remember for the life of me why he has to go back to China. Something happens. He's like this French living man who is a psychoanalyst. His love interest is in prison, and he is hanging out with this woman whose husband died on their wedding night, and I don't know. I have no idea. I don't know what happened in this book. I was there for the entire ride. I was there. I was present. But I don't know what was going on. This was really confusing to me. And very forgettable. Sorry to say that. It still has a beautiful spine, and I'll be happy to put it on my shelf because of how pretty it is. No idea what this was supposed to be about either. There's also a bunch of stuff about virginity. That's a big part of this, and I also just, I have no idea why. There's also stuff about like being jailed. I don't know. I'd have to read like a cheat sheet for what happened in this book to understand what happened in this book. And then I just finished reading The Radleys by Matt Haig. I have seen now that some covers for this book, I don't know what cover I would have gotten, but I didn't get a cover. Some covers for this book are very clever. There's like fangs with a white picket fence, or like blood on a white picket fence, which is very fun because this is about a family of vampires who are living in suburban England, I'm pretty sure. So we have vampires. They are like abstaining vampires. They are trying to live without drinking blood. And there's like this abstainer's handbook for vampires who want to act like ethically. This mother and father vampire have children that they have not told they're vampires. And that goes quite wrong. And there's a lot of repercussions of what happens from them not telling their children that they're vampires. And they have a family member, the husband's brother. He is a practicing, like, killing people vampire. And they call him for help. And then that causes a lot more problems. So this is a very like stressful situation. It read kind of like a CW plot line, or maybe not exactly CW because there wasn't like a bunch of like ooey gooey romance or like sexy hunk kind of thing. So maybe like somewhat of like an FX plotline. It just seemed very like TV to me. And it's like an entertaining story about a family of vampires. And that's kind of how I felt. Maybe a little bit like Stranger Things. Like, I don't know, there's just like a TV formulaic aspect to this book. Perfectly fine entertainment, but not really much more than that. And with that, I think I have closed out an entire thrift store book haul where I read everything except for the one book that I unhauled. I'm pretty sure I've covered all of the books now, right? Red Mars, Mr. Moe's Traveling Couch, and the Radleys, I think. Also, that's where I'm up to for now. I'm in the process of reading Second Stage Lensman by E.E. Doc Smith. I'm on board at this point. At the beginning, I was really not interested in what was going on. At this point, I'm having a fun time. I'm having a fun time with this silly book. So that's where we're at with that. And then I'll show you all of the rest of the books that I haven't read yet. And I don't know how much longer I'll be on this TBR before I give it up. I have 9 books left, it looks like. I have Joanna Russ's The Hidden Side of the Moon, which I really wanted to read. But instead I read The Second Stage Lensman because I wanted to get an audiobook and I couldn't find one for this. Then I have Lilies and Other Stories by Ru Ji Juan. I'm pretty interested in reading this soon. Then we have Stellar Short Stories, or short novels. I'm not super keen on this right now. The Cloud People by Robert B. Kelly, because I'm having such a blast with my crappy sci-fi that I'm reading currently. I'm kind of intrigued by this. The Country of the Pointed Firs and Other Stories by Sarah Orne Jewett. I'm also really intrigued by this still. Jared Durrell, A Zoo in My Luggage. Less feeling called to this right now. Charlie and the Great Glass Elevator. I am on loan for the audiobook of this, so hopefully I get that soon. Relativity by Albert Einstein. I would also really love to read this soon. Then I have Silent World by Jacques Cousteau. I don't know if I'm like super keen on this right now, to be honest. And Replay by Sharon Creech, which I really would be interested in reading, but I feel like there hasn't been that much time to like just sit down and read a book. Like that's what I would want to do with this. I don't know. I also have Before the Coffee Gets Cold on my nightstand. I'm about halfway through it at least, and I just haven't finished it. I just haven't been reading it. So that's what I will read next. Currently, I have a couple books from the library that I need to finish before the rental is due. The Factory is due so soon, so I really need to finish reading it. But that's the state of my TBR. I think I've been doing a decent job, I feel like. It's so funny, the darker it gets, the more like color I have in my skin because I'm not just like so washed out by the sun. So anyway, now you can see I'm a pink person, not like white. So anyway, that is all I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know how your TBR is going. If you did like this video, please like it, consider subscribing, and also please consider sharing this with a friend if you liked it and you think that they would like it as well. And that is all. I will see you again soon.